It's 6 in the morning. Your hand reaches for the shower dial, and for just a second you hesitate. Because you know what you're about to do, and every cell in your body is already protesting. You turn it all the way cold. That first hit of icy water steals your breath, locks your muscles, sends your heart into overdrive. 30 seconds feels like 30 minutes. But here's what's strange. 5 minutes later, standing in your kitchen with a coffee in hand, you feel something you can't quite explain. Alert, alive, almost euphoric. That feeling isn't imagination. It's neurochemistry. A measurable surge of dopamine and norepinephrine that rivals some pharmaceutical interventions, and it lasts for hours. But the real surprise isn't the mood lift. It's what researchers found happening deeper inside the body, in a type of tissue most people don't even know they have. Today we're looking at the science of cold exposure, not the extreme biohacker version, but what actually happens when ordinary people subject themselves to brief, controlled discomfort. First, let's talk about something called brown fat. And no, this isn't a wellness fad. It's basic physiology that scientists only recently understood exists in adults. You have two kinds of fat. White fat stores energy. That's the stuff around your waist that your body holds onto for winter famines that never come. Brown fat is different. Instead of storing calories, it burns them to generate heat. Babies have lots of it. It's how they stay warm without shivering. For decades, scientists assumed brown fat disappeared as we grew up, gone by adulthood, just a relic of infancy. Then PET scanning technology got better, and researchers started seeing something unexpected, patches of metabolically active brown fat lighting up in adult neck and shoulder scans. Not in everyone, and not in equal amounts. But it was there. Adults had brown fat, and it was burning calories. This discovery sparked a question that researchers have spent the last decade investigating. Could we deliberately activate this tissue? And if we could, what would happen? In 2015, researchers in the Netherlands tried something simple. They took 8 people with type 2 diabetes and exposed them to mild cold, about 14 to 15 degrees Celsius for 10 days. Not ice baths, not extreme conditions, just consistently cool temperatures, like a house in winter where someone keeps complaining the thermostat is too low. After 10 days, they measured insulin sensitivity. The improvement was 43%. That's comparable to what some medications achieve. Now, 8 people isn't a huge study. The researchers were careful to note that. But a 43% improvement in insulin sensitivity, that got attention. A 2026 review in Physiological Reports examined the accumulated evidence. Cold exposure, the authors wrote, reduces blood lipids, enhances glucose regulation, and modulates immune responses. But they were honest about limitations. Much of this evidence comes from animal studies, and their words, translational potential to humans, remains under investigation. So let's be clear about what we know and what we're still figuring out. The metabolic effects are real. But the magnitude, that varies dramatically from person to person. One meta-analysis found that people with detectable brown fat can increase their resting metabolic rate by about 14% during mild cold exposure. 14% sounds significant, but in practical terms, that might be 50 to 300 extra calories per day. Maybe less. This isn't a weight loss solution. Here's where the hype often outpaces the science. Cold exposure probably won't melt away body fat. The calorie burn is modest. What it might do, and this is more interesting, is change how your body processes fuel. A 2024 systematic review looked at studies where healthy people spent 2 hours daily at around 10 degrees Celsius for 4 weeks. Brown fat oxidative metabolism increased by 45%. Even more notable, brown fat volume actually increased. The tissue grew. Cold exposure wasn't just activating existing brown fat, it was creating more of it. But here's the catch. Nobody in the wellness space wants to mention 2 hours a day at 10 degrees. That's not a cold shower. That's serious, sustained exposure. The 30-second cold blast at the end of your shower, it might do something, but it's probably not replicating the protocols in these studies. Now let's talk about the brain effects, because this is where the research gets genuinely interesting. Cold water immersion doesn't just change metabolism, it changes neurochemistry. When you immerse yourself in cold water, dopamine concentrations surge by approximately 250%. That's not subtle. That's a significant neurochemical event. And unlike caffeine or most stimulants, this dopamine increase persists for hours, not minutes. People report feeling alert, focused, and elevated well into the afternoon. Norepinephrine, the alertness neurotransmitter, can spike even higher. Some studies show increases of up to 530%. That's extraordinary. A 2023 study published in PMC measured brain network changes after cold water immersion. Participants reported feeling more active, more alert, more attentive, less distressed, less nervous. The authors noted that participants felt, and I'm quoting here, more proud and inspired after cold water exposure. These are subjective reports, but the pattern is consistent. Andrew Huberman, the Stanford neuroscientist who's made cold exposure part of mainstream conversation, puts it this way. Deliberate cold exposure is great training for the mind. The top-down control you develop, forcing yourself to stay calm when every instinct screams to escape. That's the foundation of what people call resilience and grit. 59% of participants in one large survey reported significant reductions in depressive symptoms with regular cold water exposure. That's notable, but we need to be careful here. Surveys measure perception, not clinical outcomes. And correlation isn't causation. Maybe people who feel better are more likely to seek out cold exposure, not the other way around. The honest scientific answer is, we see promising signals, but proper clinical trials on depression and anxiety haven't been completed. We're still in early days. So what does this actually mean for you? Let's talk practical application, with appropriate caveats about what we know and what remains uncertain. Research suggests starting gradually. Consider beginning with 30 to 60 seconds of cold water at the end of your regular shower. That's it. Brief enough to be tolerable. Water temperature matters. Studies generally use temperatures between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. That's roughly 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold enough to be uncomfortable, not dangerous. You might want to aim for 2 to 3 sessions per week. The benefits appear to accumulate with regular practice. This isn't about one heroic effort, but consistent exposure over time. Here's something many people get wrong. Don't immediately take a hot shower afterward. Consider allowing your body to rewarm naturally over about 2 hours. This may extend the metabolic benefit. Morning exposure may work better if you're seeking the alertness effects. That dopamine and norepinephrine surge can feel energizing. Probably not what you want right before bed. One approach that many people find sustainable: end your regular warm shower with 60 to 90 seconds of cold. You get some benefit without restructuring your entire routine. And here's the safety consideration that matters most. If you have cardiovascular disease, Raynaud's phenomenon, or are pregnant, talk to your doctor before starting any cold exposure practice. Cold exposure can spike blood pressure and heart rate rapidly. For most healthy people, that's fine. But if you have underlying conditions, the risk profile changes considerably. Watch for warning signs during any cold exposure: chest pain, irregular breathing, severe uncontrollable shivering, or color changes in your fingers and toes. End the session immediately if any appear. I want to be honest about the weight loss claims specifically, because this is where marketing often outpaces evidence. Cold exposure probably won't transform your body composition. Even maximal brown fat activation adds maybe 50 to 300 extra calories daily. That's useful, but it's not going to offset poor dietary choices. The metabolic benefits are more subtle than the marketing suggests. Where cold exposure might genuinely help: insulin sensitivity, mood regulation, that hard-to-define sense of resilience that comes from voluntarily doing difficult things. There's something to be said for regularly confronting discomfort on your own terms, not because it's pleasant, it's not, but because the practice itself builds something. The 8-week mark seems significant in several studies. That's roughly how long it takes for brown fat volume to measurably increase and for metabolic adaptations to stabilize. So this isn't a 1-week experiment. If you're going to try cold exposure, commit to at least 2 months of consistent practice before evaluating whether it's doing anything for you. If you're finding this information useful, consider subscribing. We explore research like this every week, breaking down what the science actually says versus what the headlines claim. Now, one more thing worth mentioning. The psychological component of cold exposure might matter as much as the physiological effects. When you deliberately choose to be uncomfortable and then prove to yourself you can handle it, something shifts in how you approach other challenges. That's not mystical thinking, it's a form of exposure therapy, training your nervous system that discomfort isn't danger and that you're capable of more than you thought. The nervous system adaptations to cold exposure are well documented. Over time, your stress response to cold diminishes, your heart rate increases less, your breathing stays more controlled. Some researchers suggest this learned calm transfers to other stressors, work pressure, difficult conversations, life's inevitable challenges. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but the pattern appears in the data. So here's what the research actually tells us. Cold exposure isn't a magical intervention. It won't solve everything, and it's not for everyone. But for metabolic health, particularly insulin sensitivity, and for mood regulation, the signals in the research are genuinely promising, worth taking seriously. The dose matters more than the chill. Brief, consistent, sustainable exposure, not extreme feats of endurance. Start small, build gradually, pay attention to how you respond. And remember, always consult your doctor before making significant changes to your health routine, especially if you have underlying conditions. The research is exciting, but your situation is unique. Your grandmother probably never took ice baths, but she understood something about resilience, about doing hard things because they build character. The science is just catching up. That cold shower in the morning, it's not pleasant, but 5 minutes later, standing in your kitchen with that strange sense of aliveness, you might start to understand why people keep doing it.